Hello from Middleham in Wensleydale, on the edge of the Yorkshire Dales National Park. Ahead of me lies an epic 38-mile walk to the market town of Otley in West Yorkshire. Over the next 3 days, don't worry, the video's not going to be that long, I'm going to be documenting my route in photographs and sharing some useful photography hints and tips with you along the way as well. So if you're interested in walking or photography, or hopefully a bit of both, then join me as I walk and photograph the Six Dales Trail. The quaint village of Middleham in Wensleydale is a fantastic point from which to start this walk. It's famous for its 12th century castle, which was the childhood home of King Richard III, and the subject of my first 2 photographs of the trip. I really quite like the shot of the barn and the tree behind me here. I just got down a little bit lower so I could project the tree above where the other trees are on the hill behind, because they're a similar sort of shade and colour, so I don't want them to look like they've merged together and flatten the composition down. And just using the barn as a leading line into the shot, I think works quite nicely. Although I've only been walking a few minutes, I feel like I'm starting to get into my groove already, which for a long walk like this is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so I think I was getting a little bit overhyped. I don't actually like this photograph, I just think it's a bit flat and boring, even in black and white. But it just so happened that I walked a couple of steps further on and found this shot, which I think works so much better with the tree framing the barn and the strong lead of the wall. Other than the castle and Richard III, the other thing that Middleham's famous for is horses. In fact, there's more horses than people that make up the population of the village. It's just a good job that there was still a human being serving on in the local shop. I'm now walking along the banks of the River Cover in Coverdale, the second of our 6 dales on this epic trail, and I've been admiring the light in this little woodland clearing on the banks of the river. I think we often forget about light and contrast when we're making photographs, even though as photographers it's our medium. We often get frustrated by it, either the light's too bright or the shadows are too dark. But I think harnessing contrast and not necessarily thinking about high dynamic range, but quite low dynamic range, can not only add atmosphere to our photographs, it can also draw our eye more towards our focal points and where we want people to look in the photograph. I've liked photographing these little rock sculptures that people have built on this little area of rocky beach, just highlighting them with the light coming through the trees and isolating them against the shadows in the other trees in the background. Not only does it add that layer of depth to the photograph, I think it adds a bit of more interest and intrigue to my shots. A little bit further upstream, I found another rather intriguing composition. I quite like the way that these actual stepping stones act as visual stepping stones across the river, ending at this rather intriguing vanishing point of the gate in the trees. I soon reached the Cover Bridge Inn, which meant I was back in Wensleydale. Unfortunately, it was a little too early for a pint, so I had to carry on, which was a bit of a shame because the next section of the walk, I have to admit, wasn't that inspiring. That was, of course, until I reached the impressive ruins of Jervo Abbey, which is the largest privately owned Cistercian monastery in the UK. From the ground, I must admit, it just looks like a pile of stones, but I quite like this aerial shot I took with my drone, showing off its historical footprint from above. Not too far from the abbey, I came across this lovely little tree clinging to a hillside, bathed in the beautiful summer sunshine. I know, it looks like a Windows desktop photo, doesn't it? Yeah, we'll move on. It might have been too early for a pint, but what about an ice cream? Oh wait, I'm dairy intolerant, so that wasn't going to happen either. So I kept on going, meandering my way through some fields and over stiles to my next little point of interest, which was the village of Ellingstring. quite like the juxtaposition of the colour and the shabby chic nature of the farmyard here. And, wait a minute, am I looking forward in time? Is that me looking back at myself out of the farmhouse window in years to come? Oh, and I also photographed an abandoned building. After a spot of lunch, I was heading up onto my first moorland crossing of the walk. It was absolutely spectacular up there, and I loved this simple shot of the heather and the sky separated by the wall and stile. Yeah, I know that the horizon's dead centre, but I like it. There's some quite difficult walking conditions there, striding through the heather and the bracken, but I've made it to the top of the first moorland section on the Sixdales Trail. Behind me, on the far horizon, I can just about make out the industrial skyline of Teesside, and ahead of me are the moors I'm still yet to cross. It's actually been quite difficult to remember I'm meant to be taking photographs as I'm fighting through all the undergrowth. I'm just going to have to remind myself on the way to come to pick up my camera and pick up my head and eyes as well to have a good look around, because on a linear route there isn't any going back. After more overgrown paths, and with my legs torn to shreds by gorse bushes, I was making my way down into Colsterdale and Gollinglyth Foot, where I was met by this quintessentially English scene. Of course, I decided not to include the bins for obvious reasons. Many of you all know I'm a sucker for an abandoned farm, and this one was an absolute peach. From an old hearth to doorways to nowhere, it was crying out to be photographed. This shot is my favourite because of the multiple layers of interest. After leaving the abandoned farm behind, I was crossing over higher ground once again, on farm tracks that seemed to go on forever. Oh no, not more bins. Don't worry, I didn't photograph these ones either. Instead, I soon reached another abandoned farm. There's a bit of a theme appearing here, isn't there? I quite like the lead of the track here, taking you past the farm buildings, and the intrigue of the windows on the right-hand side. I wonder what's beyond those. Of course, if I'm not photographing an abandoned farm, you can probably find me photographing a vanishing track instead. I really quite like this one in black and white, just the contrast of the trees and that sumptuous vanishing point in the light. A little bit further on up the track, and you guessed it, I found another abandoned farm, shooting it once again with the horizon line dead centre, but I think it works here with the tree framing the barn and the contrast in blues and greens. Maybe it was the moorland air getting to me, but I took another shot that I wouldn't usually take. I don't usually like flat horizontal lines, but I think the colour contrast in this one helps your eye to jump from layer to layer through the landscape. This is more of a me shot, a broken horizon line with a clear subject and some colourful foreground interest. What's not to like? These shooting lodges framed by the rocks on the moor are a really iconic point of the walk, and one which I couldn't go without photographing. I think this is my favourite shot of them, taken from my drone. Yes, I'm afraid this is another vanishing track, and why it's so vibrant I don't know. Maybe I was just in a happy mood when I was editing. Don't worry, I didn't photograph this one. Well, I've reached the small hamlet of Bowthwaite in Nidderdale, which for me signals the end of day one on the trail. I must admit, I feel like I've been looking at my map a little bit more than my camera today, but it has been a spectacular walk so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what day two has to offer, which for you will be in a couple of seconds' time, but for me it'll be after a bit of a hose down, a good night's sleep and a well-deserved pint. not necessarily in that order. It's day 2 on the Six Dales Trail, and today my route is taking me from Bowthwaite to Thruscross Reservoir, through Nidderdale to the head of Wharfedale. I've put my sun cream on so it's clouded over, but the sun is trying to come back out again, so I've got high hopes for another great day on the trail. It wasn't long until I had my first shot in the bag for day 2 on the trail, and I really quite like it. This waving line of the edge of the reservoir in black and white surrounded by the trees, plus a vanishing track and an abandoned farm in the same shot. Walking along the banks of Gowthwaite Reservoir for quite some time, I'm now well and truly on the banks of the River Nid proper itself, and I'm seeing quite a few more people on the trail as well, which must mean that civilization in the form of the quaint town of Pateley Bridge can't be far away. When I arrived in Pateley Bridge, it was absolutely bustling with people, which I must admit doesn't usually inspire me to get my camera out. What does that sign say? 80p for 4 hours? What a rip-off. This set of sculptures is known as Pillars Past, and it represents people from Pateley Bridge's heritage. I quite like this shot cropped in of this one figure. The textures work quite nicely, as does the tinge of green. As I followed the River Nid out of Pateley Bridge, the reflections were absolutely spectacular. I really like the abstract nature of this shot. There is a bit of a vanishing point as well, which draws your eye through, but you're not quite sure which is reflection and which is reality. This is another shot that I wouldn't usually take, but I really like the layers of composition and the way it shows off the history and heritage of the area. My next stop was Glasshouse's Mill Pond. Well, I suppose it wasn't really a stop because I was just passing through, but the tranquil nature of it made me slow down and appreciate my surroundings. And of course I had to get the photograph of the classic boat hut, which was made even more impressive by 2 herons on the top interacting with each other. I also really like this black and white shot of Glasshouse's Mill a bit further downstream. It's got the classic quintessential Tom vanishing point, and I think the black and white shows off the history of the scene as well. I'm just embarking on my first major climb of the day as we leave the River Nid and Nidderdale behind and head up into Guy's Cliff Woods. I've made it to the banks of Guy's Cliff Tarn, and the sun has come out just at the right moment. It's absolutely beautifully peaceful here. I think I'm going to sit down and have my lunch before moving on, because I just want to soak up this place for a little bit longer. Of course, I had to snap this shot before I had my lunch, just in case the sun went in behind one of the clouds again. No matter what type of photography you're interested in, I think a really important question to have in mind when you're out and about with the camera is, who or what are my photographs for? When we have an audience in mind when we're making pictures, it helps us to make more concise, better decisions when we're out in the field, because it helps dictate the sort of subject matter that we photograph and how we photograph it. Take this walk, for example. I'm making photographs for me that will act as personal memories of when I walked the Sixdales Trail, but I'm also making photographs that will hopefully appeal to my YouTube audience. Thinking about those two audiences when I make the photographs that I make will hopefully help more people to like and engage with the pictures that I'm making. After walking through a few more bleak fields, I saw a flash of colour ahead of me, and I couldn't help but photograph this tractor's trailer. I went for an abstract view with the lines and circles and various different shapes and colours, which I think works quite nicely. A few more undulations and bleak fields later, and Thruscross Reservoir was finally coming into sight, my destination for day 2 on the Sixdales Trail. By this point, I was obviously channeling my inner abstraction with another abstract shot, this time of the impressive Thruscross Reservoir Dam. Well, I've made it to Thruscross, my destination for day 2 on the Sixdales Trail. The weather hasn't been quite as good as it was yesterday. I knew I shouldn't have put that sun cream on, but I still feel it's been a fantastic walk, and I can't wait to see what my final leg has to offer me tomorrow. I'll catch up with you in a few seconds, but first, I'm off for a pint. That's good stuff. I'm on the final leg of the Sixdales Trail. Today I'll be walking down through Wharfedale and over into Wharfedale to my final destination of Otley. It's amazing what a bit of sun can do. In order to get to Otley for my Sunday lunch, I set off slightly earlier on day 3, and this little bit of golden hour light packs a punch, and this photograph is definitely one of my favourites from the whole trip. I don't know if it was the light or just the spectacular nature of my surroundings, probably a combination of both, but this section of the trail along Upper Wharfedale definitely came in as one of my highlights. It also did a fantastic job of quelling the pain of my ever-growing blisters. This shot sums it up for me. I love the light hitting the tree and the way that your eye follows the river into the woodland paradise. By the time I'd reached the banks of Wensleydale Reservoir, the light was getting really quite harsh, so I decided it was time for a bit more black and white photography. Do I like this photograph? It's alright, but to be honest with you, I regret taking it, or at least I regret filming myself taking it, because not only had I clicked the shutter button, but I turned round to hear an almighty crash. Goodbye lens. Wiping the tears away, I carried on up through Swinsty Wood and out into the wonderful landscapes of Lower Washburndale. Was that a smile I saw there? I must have been putting it on for the camera, because at this point, I must admit, I wasn't too happy. I think photography is one of those hobbies where you need other interests alongside it, something to photograph. Along this walk, I've really appreciated having my camera around my neck, because at times I've thought, right, I must put in the miles and get to my location as soon as I possibly can. But having my camera has made me slow down and look up and look around at my surroundings and enjoy every single step. If you find something that you enjoy as much as photography and photograph that, then you're on to a winner, because not only will you be more inspired to go out and take photographs, each and every shot will be another step on that journey of discovery. As you can see just ahead, there was another piece of rusting old farm machinery overgrown by the surrounding foliage, and you guessed it, I couldn't resist another shot. I really like the way that the contrast and the warm light works in this shot, and of course the vanishing point of the track. What's not to like here? Some of you avid watchers of the Yorkshire Photo Walks YouTube channel may recognise Dobb Park Bridge from my Leading Lines video. If you haven't seen it, then give it a watch after this one, why not? Anyway, I decided not to take any photographs because, let's face it, I'd done it. So I headed up the big steep hill onto the final stretch of moorland overlooking Linleywood Reservoir. And yes, I found another farm, but shock horror, this time it wasn't abandoned. I do like this shot though. The greenery, the sunshine, it just has a nice warm feel to it. It wasn't long before I was walking back through Clifton Village. Population 33. I wonder how many of them are horses. I'm now heading down into Wharfedale, the final dale on our 6 Dales trail. It's been an epic walk of nearly 38 miles over 3 days, but my final destination of the town of Otley is now in sight. I do hope you've enjoyed joining me on the 6 Dales trail and seeing my photographs along the way as well. If you have, then please give this video a like and let me know down in the comments as well. And consider subscribing to the Yorkshire Photo Walks YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. I'm going to head down to the riverside in Otley now, the official finishing point of this trail, where a pint and my lunch awaits me. After 38 epic miles of beautiful scenery and hopefully 1 or 2 decent photographs, I'd finally made it to my destination of Otley and took my last shot of the trip, just to prove that I'd made it really. And that last beer, it was the sweetest of them all.